Welcome back to another Detection Engineering Dispatch episode. Alex here with a surprise little treat and the very final episode of our October Cybersecurity Awareness Month lineup. If you've been keeping up with our series, you know that the theme for all of this month's content has been about giving back to the community. So if you've missed any of the segments, you can always catch up on our YouTube channel, or if you're more of a podcast on the go kind of type, we're now officially on Spotify. So don't forget to follow and rate the show if you enjoy the content. Today's episode is all about the new-ish and developing role that is the detection engineering role today, right? 2024. And I'm going to be going in on that with none other than someone who has walked the path of life himself, right? Chris Black from NBCUniversal. Thanks so much for coming on the pod, Chris.
Thank you for having me. I love your little costume there.
I love yours.
I mean,
Chris, Chris, you can follow Chris on his Substack. He's writing about all this kind of content on detectandintel.substack.com and on his Twitter or X SBC Cyber, which I'll post it in the chat and all relevant channels. Now, Chris, you've got some years of experience here in the trenches. So what I want to do is talk about, kind of pull back this behind the scenes, if you will, this curtain on what it really means to be, a detection engineer, what they actually even do, like how it's kind of evolved, right? Because it's still pretty new-ish, how to get in on the role, right? And take our listeners through that, because not all heroes, I guess, wear capes, right? Pretty cool detections, right? So as a fellow DE yourself, why don't we kick off with your intro? What originally drew you to the space, to the industry, and what keeps you excited about it to do what you do?
yeah, so I honestly, like maybe a lot of folks in the InfoSec community, I was inspired, by movies, TV shows growing up. It's cheesy, but I loved the Jason Bourne spy movies, The Matrix, like all the classic like hacker movies. Like that was something like just I was drawn to. And then when I went to college, I saw classes like network defense and ethical hacking, and I'm like, okay, I'm in. That's my ticket. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. I went to school for cybersecurity, and I've, been doing it since.
So your school did have the cybersecurity kind of like track, because we were talking about on our previous episode with Rihanna Schultz that when I was in school, we didn't really have that curriculum. Like it was like computer science and maybe systems and like information technology, and that was it. Like we didn't have it. Now it's a little bit different, but I'm glad you were able to have a full-on course.
Yeah, and it was actually in the business school. So obviously you've got the super technical side of things, but one of the things that we also learned is like, how does cybersecurity or infosec matter to the larger business, and the pros and cons of that, type of function. But yeah, ultimately I definitely think it's grown more. Like other schools have added a cyber program, but yeah, I think it was pretty new at the time.
It is, and definitely not anymore. But we love to hear and see that you've got a lot of inspo early on from movies like The Matrix. For our listeners that are not following on YouTube and they're just listening on Spotify, we are in fact like dressed as The Matrix for this Halloween special, and we've got the Zoom background going on and everything. So make sure you catch the YouTube view there. But it is very still evolving, right? This role that is detection engineering, almost so much like we're almost like racing to keep up with it, since it's not only is it a new role or new name, but I've seen it kind of spread out across different ways to say it, right? There's like cyber analyst, there's incident responder, there's just a security analyst, there's network analyst, but all of them pretty much do the same thing, and of course all of them are in skyrocketing demand. So given that it is so relatively new, what do you see as kind of this primary factor and driver behind the emergence of that role, of what detection engineering role and how that came about?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's the maturity of the infosec industry. Like, as you said like SOC analysts, incident responders, as those roles have progressed and kind of matured to a point, I
Yeah.
think people are starting to ask, like, we're getting a ton of false positives on this alert. What are we doing about it? But I
Hmm.
don't have time as a responder who's getting called at 2 a.m. Like, I don't have time to tune this alert. I don't, I know what's going on, but like, I need someone else to come in. And I think that has been just the progression of just a super specific type of role.
Yeah, and another thing I thought about, like as you said that, was like as you know, these analysts are changing different roles in the industry, right? If they're going from one job to another, they have to learn new tech stacks because you know, each company's not everyone's gonna have Splunk, not everyone's gonna have, you know, the same EDR, so they have to kind of, you know, jump into whatever it is that they're using. So and so
Mm-hmm.
it almost becomes a independent of whatever the software is used, but more so like it's critical thinking, right? How did you
Yeah.
transition yourself from like that traditional security role to now this emerging specialization that is a DE role?
Yeah, honestly, and I was, I said this as kind of a joke or an example, but honestly, I didn't like being on call. Like as a responder, like in my opinion and kind of my perspective, like I wanted to be able to enjoy, dinner or be able to go out and not have to worry about
Oh
getting
yeah.
paged out. And I was like, I loved, like I said, kind of like the intelligence side of things as well as the cyber operations. And I think detection engineering role is kind of a combination of the two. And
It
it's
is.
more on the engineering side. And so I think that has kind of been the main driver of just being able to get into the technical aspects, into the weeds and ultimate, like I love it. Like I think it's definitely a passion of mine that I've kind of stepped into over the last couple of years. But yeah, honestly, it comes down to just, the pros and cons of being on call and maybe a little bit of burnout. It kind of focused on why I stepped into DE, but yeah, like ultimately that's it.
I think we touched on it there a little bit. So let's break it down. So how would we like defer it? You're saying like the not being on call so much, right? So if we take a look at like, I don't know, the security analyst role, a security engineer role, an architect role, right? Like how would we define that role of a detection engineer? Would you say like you have to think more strategically rather than just respond to tickets, like just sitting just behind Jira responding to tickets, right? You have to think more like yeah, like let's define that. Let's define what that role really is.
So I think the way I look at it is that there's two sort of functions when it comes to detection engineering. There's kind of the proactive approach, which
Okay.
involves, like you mentioned, like the architecture side of things, kind of thinking about maybe an application in question that you're wanting to build the detections off of. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, what did these logs look like? How would an adversary, target or how would an analyst triage these application logs and like kind of focusing on the bigger picture,
Yeah.
like similar to what an architect would be. And then kind of on the engineering side, like understanding the platform and the process of pushing a detection into production, like kind of understanding the different platforms and the different security engineering tools that are involved in your organization. Like those are kind of different ways that you're building in kind of the more technical engineering architecture type of those aspects into detections, but then also kind of the operations response intelligence side too, where you're having to read through threat reports, kind of dig into the threat intelligence. Maybe you're building detections off of an incident that occurred. And I think that's kind of the second aspect of a detection engineering role. So, another reason why I enjoy detection engineering is because you have to do different types of, or you have to think in different ways within cybersecurity and kind of look at the broader picture or, the broader, impact to the organization.
It's absolutely yeah. They have to be more strategic, and I think that, and but yet at the same time still have like the knowledge to do those other traditional SOC functions, and I think that's why so many organizations are now investing in dedicated detection engineering teams because it's thinking on a whole different level. And I think it just might be the coolest job that you've if you haven't heard of it, you know, now you have. I know for a fact if I told my parents, like, I work with a lot of detection engineers, they don't even know what that means. Like, but I see more and more organizations investing in dedicated detection engineering groups, and rightfully so. Now, on that note, when I want to pivot into kind of the skills and the knowledge maybe required for someone to jump into this kind of role. What and so what do you think are those kind of key skills or areas of expertise that are pretty essential for someone looking to make maybe a transition into that role?
Yeah, honestly, and maybe this is a little bias on my side coming from the blue team side of things, but I do think that there needs to be a analyst or blue team type of foundation in terms of,
Mm,
understanding how an alert would get triaged, what are some things within, maybe an EDR alert that you would look at and investigate. Honestly, kind of as I've thought through this over the last few months or last year or so, honestly, I do also think red teaming and understanding the adversary side of it, how do these large breaches occur? Like think about the steps along the way, like in, what's the intrusion or initial access type function? What does execution look like? And I think if you're able to understand both sides, that
yeah.
kind of really helps the detection building process and kind of gets you thinking about, okay, so how would I know this, malicious activity is occurring. How do I build a detection off of that? Plus, how would the SOC and response team triage and respond to this? So I think it's kind of, a long answer, like it's both red and blue sides, like both of those foundational aspects.
I love what you said. Think like a hacker. What is that one quote? Like you have to know yourself, but you also have to know the enemy because once you know the enemy, you already won the war. So someone said that.
Yeah.
And yeah, understanding. I also think I would add to that, like understanding log analysis, like know what these events are, there what they mean, know what each key property, how does that contribute to what's happening there, knowing a little bit your way around scripting, but most importantly, being able to connect the dots, like that trigger point, like how do you jump from the next trigger to the next trigger to like go in and like, okay, well, what's the next thing I need to investigate from here? Like kind of that question asking mindset. I feel like there's got to be a good understanding. One of our last guests, Brady Stover, shout out. I like what he said. He was like, I feel like as an analyst, you have to know, you have to have a pretty good intuition of what's normal, right? And what's not,
Mm-hmm.
which takes practice and it takes kind of knowledge of your own environment and your own landscape. Now, on that note, then, do you have any technical skills that you consider as like foundational? Like what role do they play in day-to-day work of a detection engineer? Let's talk about some of those
Yeah,
techie skills.
I would say understanding, basic scripting languages. I think that always helps as you're growing into, a senior engineer role, like building more complicated detections and building more, complex queries. I think having a knowledge of, Python, PowerShell, scripting languages in general. Honestly, this is kind of not a hot take per se, but a maybe not the more traditional answer. I think understanding how APIs work and API security and maybe how web applications work, I actually
Yeah.
think that's super beneficial
Mm,
because everything's moving into the cloud.
API driven.
But
Hmm.
yeah, and I think one of the harder things to detect on are like your microservices, your containerization, your Docker functions. Like those are very challenging, maybe more so than a traditional EDR. So kind of understanding how that works from an engineering perspective and like you said, understanding what looks normal, what is a secure API or building a secure API, like those types of functions, I think are super helpful.
Understanding APIs. Like Jeanette, I feel like we should like clip that and roll it, and it'll be viral in the SecOps community. I agree. I haven't heard that take before, and it just gave me a flashback to like working in my class with like Postman, like
Hmm.
try like
Hmm.
trying to get them to integrate, trying to get responses. And but it's so true, everything is going API driven, everything is going to the cloud. And you know what, I don't really see that many like API security like software out there. Like, is that a thing? Can I go on like can I coin that, or is that a thing?
I think it does fall under like product security and like, how do you secure like your web app or your mobile app? Like that's probably different than securing the computer on your desk. And so I think
Mhm.
the trend I've noticed is that that all kind of gets either pushed into like DevSecOps or
Yeah.
the new term of like product security.
Yeah. Yeah, like either secure it by design, or it does that web app like log all of what's entering and what's happening in that web application. And
Hmm.
are there rules in that? Because not many, I mean, not many sims already come, because a lot of these web apps, I mean, in what I've seen, a lot of the web apps are custom made. So those that means that you have to create the rules yourself for that. It doesn't come out of the box. It's not a vendor provided, rule that it comes with to protect web apps, unless I guess it's a SaaS application.
Yeah.
But that's true. I really like what you said.
I think the point about like SaaS applications as well, like there's a lot of detection use cases when it comes to SaaS applications because like think about the Slack, I guess, compromise or the compromise of other media companies via Slack, right? Like
I saw
Slack,
that. I saw
you
that in the
you
news
you
recently.
can't, yeah, so you can't necessarily throw an agent or an EDR on your Slack
No, you
environment.
can't.
Like what do you do when it comes to that? And so I think SaaS stuff on top of like the web app and kind of the other aspects of security, building detections based on your SaaS logs, like that's I think huge or would be a huge detection opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. On the note you said about scripting earlier, I saw on Reddit a couple of days ago an 8-day post forum, and with coming in at 80 upvotes, someone commented, and the whole thread was about like, do we really even need PowerShell for the SOC? Do you need PowerShell for the SOC? I'm 2 years in, I haven't used it once. And someone commented saying, you know what, like a PowerShell experience is all right, but I would say, and I quote, there's a fuck ton of other skills that are more valuable to boost your profile at the SOC if you're looking for the next job. Now granted, PowerShell is, if given, sufficient permissions or exploited permissions, can be extremely detrimental. Like we have an entire just detection content pack just on PowerShell alone. Do you find yourself using a lot of PowerShell?
I do not, but
Mhm.
I do feel like it's at least good to know kind of like how PowerShell works. What does it look like? How does it get logged? And yeah, like understanding those aspects, from a detection standpoint, I would say like every organization is different. And so like maybe you use PowerShell for integrations or kind of your detection pipeline or workflow, maybe that's relevant to your team. But
Mhm.
as a whole, I would definitely agree with their response. Like there's a handful of other things that are just as important, and maybe understanding how PowerShell works and is logged might be a bit more important than being able to write a super complex high-end PowerShell script.
100% agree. And that's also in line with another pretty interesting article as well that I saw on Medium. It is a member only article, so I can give you the quick 101 on it, but it was from Tamer Lijal, and his whole thing was about how the need for pure technical skills in cybersecurity is declining. Like, it goes right along with that post. You don't need to be this super expert like scripter developer like anymore, because of this shift into the AI world, right? AI excels at processing data and performing super routine tasks, but you know what it doesn't do well? where AI sucks? Creative problem solving, like, critical thinking and strategic decision making. No AI is going to give you that kind of strategic management decision science, nor can AI read the room. So that's where I feel like that's why the detection engineering role is like so strategic, and it's so much more than knowing SQL really well, which I mean you have to know to build a query, right? But it takes so much more than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
I would definitely say like thinking like if you were to copy a response from Chat GPT or one of the other big ones and kind of pasted your detection from that into your sim and just put it into production, like there's going to be a ton of false positives. Like there's no context into just what AI might give. And like you said, there's no critical thinking or understanding how detections are built in your environment.
Exactly.
And like you could maybe give it a problem like, hey, how do we solve for X, Y, and Z? But I still think that AI is a good kind of quote unquote force multiplier in terms of detections and kind of the technical aspect, but you're never going to be your team huddled into a room super late with pizza and just brainstorming tons of ideas and going back and forth. No idea is a bad idea. Like I think that's where problems, really complex problems, get solved. I don't know if AI would be able to do that.
No, I think that's so spot on. And I was going to ask you, like, how does one solve that muscle of creative problem solving? AI won't, we know that, but it's what it boils down to in a detection engineering role. You're right. Like AI is not going to know your company's unique environment conditions and what you should be preparing for, what all that you have to build and go and implement the best rule for your org. They're not going to know that, and hence the birth of the detection engineering role. So I think that's pretty spot on. How do we practice this muscle? Like how do you practice creative problem solving, would you say?
Yeah, honestly, I think there's even some non-infosec things that you can do, like playing video games or kind of doing things that are enjoyable but still problem solving. I think
Yeah.
is a way to kind of grow those skills. I think even like thinking on the infosec side, like doing fun capture the flag events,
Oh
or
yeah. Puns.
I'm trying to think of the card game that is very common, like the security card game. I think it's Black Hills InfoSec puts out kind of a incident response card game. I'm totally drawing a blank on what it's
Oh
called,
my
but
gosh,
like
it's a
those
giveaway.
types of, yeah, it's a super helpful way to a kind of step away from the grind, but also it gives you an opportunity to think differently, think outside of the box, because it's a game, and I think that's ultimately the best way to kind of help grow your critical thinking skills
Yeah,
or creative
gamifying
thinking
anything.
skills.
Oh my gosh, gamifying anything, people are more prone to do it. Like I think.
Yeah, I mean it works, I think.
Tabletops, what are those there sometimes, I mean, these can be full on paid engagements. I At the last company I was at, we had something like this. We paid someone to come in and basically like put us through a simulation of what would you guys, are you prepared to handle this thing, and then we all had to be like, well, this is what I would do, and we had to come up with a plan, and that really like gets you into thinking like how would we actually have addressed that issue if that happened.
Yeah, and that I think is, I mean, how you solve these problems. Like if you're in a tabletop and you don't have the answer, like from my perspective, senior leaders are like, you got to figure it out then. Like this is why we do tabletop exercises, to get creative, figure out solutions to the problems that they throw at you. And honestly, they've been really good. Like just thinking of the different intrusions or the different types of adversary activities. Like nowadays, the tabletops are pretty good.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to really, pushing yourself or anyone else, on your team to look at issues in different angles and then work off from each other's ideas. And at the end of that like day, I think you're gonna come up with something pretty magical.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Now, I love that. Now, it's like almost like detection engineering is like part detective work, part, part science. Now, going on the topic of some I guess some pretty heavy topics. Burnout is a pretty big concern, right, in this field. It's probably one of the top concerns in our industry. And while it can be very fun, we're also very prone to burnout, and it can get kind of intense in that regard. Are you comfortable talking about burnout or sharing any practices that has helped you in the field?
Yeah, totally. I would say for me, kind of on the personal level, like just taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally, I think goes a long way. Getting rest, maybe stepping away from a computer or from the screen, taking a walk. Like it sounds, oversimplified, but those little things do help kind of refresh your attitude or your mental space. I mean, not health advice, but sleep, sleeping, and personally for me, like I kind of stopped drinking. Like as I've
Okay.
gotten older, like I just like it's not helping me. So why even do it? And I think, yeah, all of that to say, just taking care of yourself, and it goes a long way, and it definitely helps. It helps kind of digest the day-to-day grind, and it lets your brain breathe a little bit.
Oh my God, I can't tell you enough. Like this walking, like I saw this thing on Reddit, like it's like your brain activity before and after a walk. Like even just walking, taking a step out and like walking for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like when I walk the dog, you come back and it's like you have a completely different perspective. Oh, suddenly I'm not so annoyed with this Slack request anymore. Like
Yeah,
your brain activity after a walk is so much better prepared to deal with the kind of people you have to deal with. Like, no comment there.
yeah,
Yeah, and also let me tell you, like the amount of people that I come across as sober now are like I don't know. I want to say it's like 1 in 4. It's so great that more and more people are on this journey. Spider-Man, Tom just released like this whole thing
that's
on
right.
yeah, and he like this mocktail beer, like this no alcoholic beer called Biro. Like I gotta say, I've always wanted to try it. I can't ever do it. I don't know, my friends. It's such a big part of my life. I'm trying to though, but I gotta give it to you. Congratulations on that. And more people, I'm so glad that more and more people are on this journey. And it's almost kind of like I remember the shift from when in America all the marketing all decided that smoking wasn't cool anymore, and now nobody smokes. Literally nobody smokes. But in Europe everyone still smokes, but here nobody smokes. And I feel like maybe that's the kind of the road we're taking, and I'm really glad for it because that's pretty healthy.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the thing that works for me is like I'm just if we're out with friends, I'll have a drink. But if I
Uh,
have more than that, I know I'll sleep poorly. I'll be in a bad mood the next day. I'm up pretty early going to the gym, and it's like it kind of spirals like from there. Like I know at this point that it's not going to do anything for me. So maybe one while we're out. I don't really drink at home. Not really pouring a beer, cracking a beer after work. So yeah, I've noticed a big difference.
you're thinking more about your future self. Like it goes back. We've come full circle. Detection engineers are strategic thinkers. They're worried about what their future self is going to be. Whereas we're just thinking in the moment right now. Like, but I love that so much. Well, I guess looking into the future, then, do you think the detection engineering role will continue evolving? Like, do you see the future of SOC jobs? Like, where is that going? Like, I had this theory. I was talking to Darwin on one of our guests. Like, I think that the data science role, like data scientists and the SOC role, are going to merge eventually. Do you have any like I don't know futuristic like theories?
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of the direction I was going to go is I think with, large language models and AI, I think because one of the biggest aspects of detection engineering and one of the problems that we have is that there's so much data in your SIM or your data lake. And so throwing an LLM or an AI at that problem, you kind of look at like, okay, these are maybe the data sets that we don't have queries for, but are most commonly exploited, or kind of using LLMs to your advantage as a detection engineer to build new detections, gather information on the log sources that you have. Because honestly, like if there was no, if I had to do that manually, I would have to go through each data set and say, okay, A, do the logs look good? B, is this relevant? And like for larger companies, that could take, hours and hours of engineering time. And so that is kind of, I think, the future state of detection engineering is having some sort of large language model AI function kind of applied to that in, like you said, a data science way, or thinking of things on a maybe a scientific level instead of a more traditional enterprise security level.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And still, I think it would still going to blend together the tech now on a larger scale, but also the human intuition. I don't think that's going away ever. I really don't. And I think that's why this role is so important. It's going to continue developing. More and more organizations are hopping on the bandwagon of investing in this role. And so the future just seems like it's all about collaboration, and hope is making a comeback too with healthier choices. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the insights that you shared today, Chris. I think it was pretty solid conversations for all novice or analysts that are thinking about the detection and engineering role, how to break in. And I think you passed the vibe check.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course, we have two more questions. Well, what we Jeanette and I usually do is like we stitch together all of the responses to these two questions from all of our guests, and it's what do you love the most of about the SecOps community, and what would you like to see more of in the SecOps community?
Honestly, the first one, what do I love most? I think I love like the fact that there's kind of a general understanding that we're all in this together. Like I'm not gonna break out in what is it, High School Musical, we're all in this together. But
You.
not a it's not gonna be my Halloween costume this year, I promise. I think there's kind of a mutual understanding that this is hard. Like cyber, either at the analyst level, at the leadership level, like it's still, we're not solving finance problems or whatever marketing problems. We're actually facing someone else on the other side of the screen, and I think that allows the community to kind of come together.
Absolutely. We're dealing with actual adversaries. Maybe some unintentional, but some very intentional, and that's what keeps it so freaking interesting. I agree. So
Yeah.
thank you, Chris. And to our listeners, don't forget to check out our upcoming episodes. We've got plenty of more stuff coming your way. Our next episode in 2 weeks, we've got Micah Funderbunk. We're going to be talking about risk-based alerting and entity correlation in Sentinel and for Microsoft Shop. So if you want to learn all about the tricks there, tune in for that. We hope you enjoyed this episode breaking down exactly what is a detection engineer. Now, with all that being said, I am beyond excited to plug in our very latest initiative created as a big thank you to the detection engineering community, which, as you know, is exactly what we're all about here on Detection Engineering Dispatch. We collaborated with the SANS Institute to build, create, and essentially going to publish a report in 2025 with a mission to capture the true state of the detection engineering role, right, as it's evolving. It's a field that we've previously discussed. It's newish, right? It's moving at lightning speed, and it's just endlessly fascinating. And here's where you come in, right? The survey that we need to collect data from, right? The official SANS 2025 Detection Engineering Survey is open for submissions until mid-November of this year, of 2024. So if you are building detection rules and wrangling SIMs and EDRs and clouds and databases in order to protect your organization, right? No matter what your title is, take 12 minutes of your time, scan the QR code that will show here, or we'll plug in the link in the show notes and help us share your voice in shaping the 2025 state of detection engineering, right? And hey, to my detection engineering network, let's keep this convo going. comment, tag your favorite detection engineer, share this to them, share the podcast, rate the show, and let's work together to build the future of detection engineering. Happy trick or treating. Make sure that you vote, and I'll see you all very soon.